And if more people come in, I can just let them in. So welcome. Good morning, everybody. For those who have not been here, my name is Shannon Graham. I'm the research and genealogy historian at the Polk County History Center, and I get to run this program, which is one of my favorite aspects of my job, just to see people and connect, genealogy communities. So very excited that y'all are here. Before we get started, I'm going to run through a couple of housekeeping things. First thing is I want to say thank you to Jennifer, who's on this call. She's from the Polk County Library Cooperative, and she does all of our fun technical stuff, like running the Zoom and providing links for recordings and things like that. So big thank you to Jennifer. She's been such a great help during this series. I also want to thank the Tampa Bay Library Consortium. They fund this series, so without them, we would not be able to meet here. So big thanks to them. And then, okay, Zoom rules, housekeeping things. So during the presentation, if you can please keep your video and camera off. It just helps, everyone to focus on what Dr. Abbott is saying. Keep the, distractions to a minimum. Closed captioning is available for this video. If you click the little more button, the 3 dots, and a little captions will come up. You can click that and it'll have closed captioning. There will be a section for questions at the end. So if you do have questions, you can wait till the end to ask, or you can pop it in the chat and I will ask for you. And then finally, a recording will be available up to 30 days following this presentation. So I will send a link to y'all after. Like later today. But again, that will be only 30 days available. So make sure to watch it during that period of time. So before we get started, I want to do a brief introduction to our speaker, who has been so generous to give us some of her time. So Dr. Deborah Abbott is a professional genealogist, and she specializes in African-American research, manuscript collections, and genealogy methodology. She's a member of the Cuyahoga County Archives Advisory Commission, and she's an associate with the Kentucky-Tennessee Associates based in Springfield, Tennessee. She's also the past president of the African-American Genealogical Society in Cleveland, Ohio, and a retired professor of counseling from Cuyahoga Community College in Cleveland. She has a Bachelor of Science and Master's of Education degree from Tuskegee University and a Ph.D. degree from Kent State University in Ohio. And I also want to mention this next bit. She says that Dr. Abbott is an instructor as well as the coordinator for both week-long African-American tracks at the Institute of Genealogy and Historical Research held at the University of Georgia in Athens and the Genealogy Research Institute of Pittsburgh held at LaRoche University in Pittsburgh. And I'm a University of Georgia graduate myself, so I have to say go Dogs. Sorry to all the Florida fans out there. But Dr. Abbott is also an instructor at Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy in Salt Lake City, Utah, and she presents lectures and workshops for national, state, and local genealogy conferences. And we are very excited to be able to experience that ourselves. So without further ado, Dr. Abbott, I will hand the floor to you.
Oh my, thank you. Shannon, thank you so much for this invitation and for allowing me to present this particular lecture. We're gonna, and I don't know if I want to really call it a lecture as it is for you, the participants, to really start to think about how you are researching your own family history, because you're going to always come up with some brick walls, and there is always, in my opinion, a way to break through them. So I am going to share with you how I at least tried to make this particular story something else, and found out later that I was the person that was wrong. So we will go through this. I've titled it Finding Goals in a Family History and Dribbling Through a Basketball Story. So let us start. And I'm asking that you please don't take any screenshots of this presentation or photographs, and please don't upload it to any type of social media. As has been mentioned before, it is being recorded and you will be able to look at it again at a later time. So let's just start with, these are the things that I think about. And I think that if you want to have successful genealogy research, these are just a few of the strategies. I'm always telling people you need to try to think like a detective. If you can think like a detective, then it means that you have to look at the evidence, you have to pay attention to what's there, you have to always know what the problem is. So you need to be able to identify the problem and then sit back and think about what your course of action is going to be in order to solve that problem. You need to gather as much information as you can, and you need to analyze each source. And sometimes most of the times though, I tell individuals, when we're looking at census records, which is usually the beginning of our research, compare them. I try not to leave a census and not know who every person in that family is or in the record that I'm looking at. I need to know who these individuals are. And so we will look at records and compare them. And there's going to be times when some of these records, you're going to need more than one record to prove a conclusion that you have made. And you need to be patient. You're not on a skateboard. You're not trying to hurry up and get somewhere. Sometimes you can knock down a brick wall in maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And other times you can't come through that wall for some years. So you need to be patient. Determine all the possible places where you might find records. I think today most people think that everything is on the computer. It is not, but a lot of it is. And I don't know if that makes sense to you. The repositories and the archives, libraries, they have started to digitize a lot of records. So there are far more records online than there was when I started. But once again, I caution people that everything is not there. Make sure you use the cluster. Make sure you use the collateral research. And what do I mean by that? Make sure that you are just not focused purely on the person that you're looking for. Look at the people who surround them. Who are the cluster? Who are their sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles? Who are the collaterals? Who are the, and I usually say, who's the storekeeper? Who's the postman? Who's the other people in the neighborhood that could help you find the person that you're looking for? And then once again, just compare the records when you find it to confirm your information. Study the social history. That's important. Know what's going on around your ancestor and during the time that they live. That will help you understand what's going on. It'll help you identify some new records, and it'll help you, in some instances, understand why they did what they did. Learn the repositories, learn the archives, learn the libraries. Where are they? What records do they hold? What about the courthouses? You need to know all of that. And because for the most part, we have not, we don't, well, we probably have, but have not researched in a place where you might be looking for your ancestor, I'm always suggesting that you go to the familysearch.org wiki and bring down what I call a research guide. And it will tell you just about everything you need to know, where the libraries are, what newspapers exist. You need to understand all of those things. So that's my strategy for a successful genealogy researcher. Now, this is an oral history. I met a gentleman by the name of Louis Lantine. And I had gone to a meeting where the genealogy meeting where people were coming in with their brick walls. And I was just listening. I didn't have a brick wall. I was listening to everybody else. And Lou was talking about his father-in-law. And he was telling these stories, and he can't find anything, and he's looked and he can't find anything. And I'm sitting and listening to him, and I'm thinking to myself, this can't possibly be true. He talked about his father-in-law who played professional basketball, and he played for a team called the New York Celtics. Now, I don't know if this is a coincidence or not, but I consider myself a basketball expert. And I'm thinking there's no such animal as a New York Celtic. There's New York Knicks, there's a Boston Celtics. But New York Celtics, I don't think so. I think they got the names mixed up. And then he said that they played against the Harlem Globetrotters. Oh, I really don't think that, because the Harlem Globetrotters plays the Washington Generals. So I listened to Lou talk about his brick wall, and then I asked him if he would stay and talk to me about this oral history. It's my first time meeting him. He doesn't know me, I don't know him. And he agreed to stay. And then he was just telling me these things, and I kept saying, where'd you get this from? His father-in-law. Okay, I still don't believe it. And then he said that the team used to drive in a car and go to the games and then come back home. Well, what kind of stuff is that? If it's a professional team, they're not riding in cars. They don't have people driving to a game and then driving backwards. So I said, please allow me to look at this. Let me see if I can straighten this story out, because I don't believe it. And he agreed that I could do that. And the other thing that I asked Lou was, had he looked in the newspapers? And he said yes. Yes, he had looked, and he could not find his father-in-law in the newspapers. Okay, let me look. I might be able to do something. So I take this little bit of information that I have, and I set up some questions, which is what you should always do. And as you move through your genealogy, the questions will become more, because every time you find something, then you're going to have another question. So in the beginning with the oral history, my first question was, is this really true? I got to figure out if this is true. Was there such a thing as the New York Celtics? Okay, right now I say no. Did they play with the Harlem Globetrotters? Right now I say no. And oh, another thing he told me, I forgot about this, is that his father-in-law went to Benedictine High School here in Cleveland, Ohio, and that he played basketball for them. And he also told me that he did not finish high school. He went to the Navy. All right, so my question again would be, when did he go to the Navy? When was he in high school, and when did he go to the Navy? So what do we need to do? We need to establish a timeline. So he told me that his father-in-law was born in 1926. So I need to establish that birth. And I need to establish it by finding him in a record type, or either the best way would be to find the birth certificate. But I need to establish his birth. I need to figure out when he would have gone to high school. And I really needed to find out what those years were, and if indeed it was Benedictine High School. I want to know when he joined the Navy, and I want to know when he played for these, quote, New York Celtics, and when he got married, and when he died. Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Lou told me when he died. I'm not sure, but I think he did. But these were the timelines, because I want to make sure that what I find is going to follow the years of Frank Piuno's life. So the first thing I did, born in 1926, I went to the 1930 census records. And for those of you who don't know, United States took census information every 10 years, starting in 1790. The census records are closed for 72 years. And so the latest one we can look at is 1950. I usually tell people start with 1950 and work backwards. But in this case, I'm trying to establish a birth for Frank. And I'm also trying to see what else I know about this, I can find out about this man. So I start with the 1930 census, since he was supposed to have been born in 26. I find him, and that's that red arrow that you're looking at. He is right here. He is 4.5 years old. That matches 1926. He is, look at all of the people in his family. He has gotten, look at all these sisters and brothers he has, Anna and Daniel and Rose and Joseph and Carmela and Michael. He's got a lot of people in his house. And then in the same house with him, there is a Vincent, and it's in Italian, Piuno, and he is working there. And I mean, he's the boarder in that same house. And you can see that everybody is coming from Italy except for the children. They are all born in Ohio. I paid attention to the name of the father. I paid attention to whether or not he owned that property. He did. Here's an O for owned. This is what it was worth right here. Okay. And this is the address. And I cut off the side that gives me the street, but I did put it down here. 11120 Ingersoll Road, Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, 1930. So here's our subject, who is Frank, and 4.5 years old. So let's go to 1940. And if we go to 1940, our Frank should be 14 years old. But again, I'm going to take you back to mom and daddy. Father's name is Frank, so I got to make sure I don't mix them up. And his wife's name is Maria. 1930. I go to 1940. Here is my Frank. And he is 14. That's what I want. Some of the children are out of this house. There's some children that are not here that were in that 1930 census. So they could have got married. Some of them did. They could have got married. They could have done a lot of things. So I'm comparing those two census records so I can keep up with this family. But the one thing that I recognize is that the wife, who is Maria, is not in this 1940 census. Frank says he is a widow. That would tell me, if that's true, that Maria died between 1930 and 1940. And she left him with these children, okay? The person in this house who gave the information to the census taker was his daughter, Rose. How do we know that? There's an X with a circle around it. 1940 is the only census that tells you who gave the information to the census taker. So my Frank is here at 14. His mother is no longer in the house. His father is here, but he has still these children in his home. So now I'm going to stop because I want to find Mama. When did she die? I find her death. She dies in 1940. March the 29th, 1940. We just finished looking at the 1940 census. So I go back and I look at the top of the census, because the date is there that the census taker came. The census taker came on April 4th. She died March the 29th. This whole family had to still be in mourning over the loss of a wife and a mother. But this is the information, again, online. I find the death record for Maria on FamilySearch.org, and I find a new, what they call a necrology file at the Cleveland Public Library, which is telling me about a death announcement. So you can see all of that here, and I know I've got the right person because it names all the, well, this one doesn't name some of the children, it names them, but not all of them. But it gives her siblings and her mother and father. So I have her maiden name as well. And then I check to see what the address is on the index and what the address is on this death announcement. Remember, 1930 and 40, the address was Ingersoll. 1-1120 Ingersoll. This death record says Mount Carmel. So I put that on my to-do list. Did they move? What's happening here? We don't know. And then we see, of course, all of this index right here is what's on this death record. So there's a lot of information that we need. So I know now that Frank lost his mother in 1940, and he was 14 years old when that happened. But I still want to see what we look like in 1950, since that's the last census I can see publicly. And I find my Frank there, and he's 24 years old, and his father is there, and he's still a widow. He is not remarried. And it says in 1950 that he is on Mount Carmel Road, 1120 Mount Carmel, 1950. So 30 and 40, we're looking at Ingersoll, part of 40, Mount Carmel, and 1950, Mount Carmel. Okay, so I put that to the side. Got to put on my detective hat to figure that out a little bit. But I decided that I needed to go back and try to find Frank in high school. So if he's 24 in 1950s, 14 in 1940, in the 40s, he's got to be in high school. Lou told me he played for his high school team. So I checked the newspaper. I checked the Cleveland Plain Dealer. I put in the search box, Benedictine High School. I found an article, found several, but I'm just sharing one with you. Benedictine High School. His name, Frank's name, is at the top just about. It is telling me that he is playing basketball. It tells me who they played. It told me that he beat Central High School, which was a junior high when I was in school. So that was my school that Benedictine beat. It also tells us that he's a sophomore. This is 1943. He is a sophomore at Benedictine High School. And he started, says his first start as a regular, and he tallied 7 goals. So he had a total of 21 points. So it shows that in the newspaper. So it sounds like he might have been a pretty good basketball player. So now that I can establish that he was indeed at Benedictine, I know that the Cleveland Public Library has high school yearbooks. I checked to see if they had one for Benedictine, and they did. And I found a photograph of Frank with his team at Benedictine, 1942-43. This was in the school yearbook. And then you can also have an idea, one, how he looked, two, his height. Here's a good basketball player, and he's not very tall, much shorter than the other players. But I have established the fact that one, he went to Benedictine, 1942-43, this is the yearbook, and that he played basketball. He didn't finish high school. Lou told me that. He said he went to the Navy. So let's see if I can find some Navy records and determine when he did that. Ancestry.com had World War II Navy muster rolls. So this card that you're looking at is the card. Let's see if this is yes, this is when he, hopefully I did this right. Let me go back just one more. Yeah, I did it right. This is when he enlisted. He's named here, as you can see. I've put an arrow there. And then this service record is going to help me a lot because I don't know how many other people in the service is going to have his same name. And so I'm going to pay more attention to this service number than I probably will his name. I'm going to look for him under his name, but this service number has got to match. Here's his enlistment date, January 27th, 1944, and it's coming from Cleveland, Ohio. All right, and then this also is telling us a little bit about Frank, and it's telling us that the receiving station was number 128. Tells you the name of the ship. You can see it up here, but it's also on this index. This is the name of the ship. This is the muster date, which was May 31st, 1944. Then I also found a report of changes. Again, this is in Ancestry, and this is 1945. Here's my Frank, same service number. So I know that I'm looking at the same person or the right person. His ship is the same ship that he enlisted and where they put him when he enlisted, and that is that AM 148. This is his service number. But down here, this is Frank too. He's number 10, so you can see that. He's number 10, and then there was a transfer, and they transferred him to someplace else, and it looks like New York. And so I tried to pay attention to all of this, and they transferred him on, was it July 22nd? He got transferred on to another ship. So now I'm interested in these ships because I want to tell this story and I want to tell it right. And so I found some websites. Ships of the United States Navy, 1940 to 45. The one on the left, that we're just looking at the top of it, that is the ship that Frank was on. I couldn't find one with its upright. I only could find a photograph looking down on it. This is the ship. It is called a minesweeper. I don't know what a minesweeper is, but that's what this was. So I had to look that up as well. And this boat was launched in 1943, commissioned in 1944, and it ended its service in 1945 at Gold Bay, Alaska. The United States transferred it to the Soviet Union. Its name changed. It turned into a T-333, and they did it under a lend-lease agreement. You can see here, hold on a second. When it was first put into the water, when it was built, it had a different name, which you see up here at the top. It was AMC 125. Then they reclassified it to the 148, which is what Frank was serving on, and they did that in 1942. So the only kind of minesweeper that I could find so that you could see what it looks like upright was the one that you see down here at the bottom. This is a minesweeper. And the minesweepers normally detected and removed naval mines before the rest of the fleet would arrive, so that would ensure safety. So I'm learning a lot about this war, about these ships, and what Frank possibly was doing on them. And then I found another card in the World War II Navy muster rolls, 1946. Here's Frank again. I'm paying attention to the service number. And they have transferred him again. This time, they've transferred him to a hospital. The hospital is in Chelsea, Massachusetts, and he went there for treatment. Now, I have not gone back to see if I can find out what was wrong with him that he had to have treatment before he came home. So this is 1946. They transferred him from the ship that he was on, the one I showed you previously, and they put him on a different ship. And here's the number. This is the ship station or activity, and then here's the number. And then I, of course, being nosy, I found the ship. So that is the one that transported him to the Naval Hospital. Then I want to know about the Naval Hospital. And I found out that the National Archives in Boston, Mass. Had some photographs. Now, this is 1940, but you can see this is the best I could do. Here is our hospital, right here. So this helps us to be able to tell a much better story than Frank was in the Navy. He did a lot of things in the Navy, and we can at least tell part of that. Now, during this time, we have a World War II draft registration. Now, does Frank have to fill that out? Because he's already been in the Navy. This is World War II. He's already been there. But I checked anyway. And yes, he filled out the card. This is 1946. I'm still paying attention to the address. This is Mount Carmel. Nothing has changed. And it asks who his employer is. And he says, I've just been discharged from the Navy. He also has here the person who will always know where he is, and that's his father. And it is that 1/11/20 Mount Carmel, and it's his father. And we've got his birth date here, February 9th, 1926. We got his phone number. I think that's Georgia, but I'm not sure. Georgia 2059. When I was growing up, my phone number was Express 15608. And he's 20 years old, and so we know a little bit about him. The back of the card tells us a little bit more. It tells us his race. It tells us how tall he is. So that student in Benedictine with that basketball team, he was 5'7". So you can imagine what those other young men, how tall they were, because he looked quite small on that picture with them. But he's 5'7", and he weighs 145 pounds, has brown eyes, he has brown hair, and he has a light complexion. This is the back of the card. He signed it, filled it out, June the 10th, 1946. But I'm still worried about this address. 1/11/20 Ingersoll for census 1930 and 40, his military draft, his mother's death record, all say Mount Carmel. Did they move? Again, Cleveland Public Library has city directories. And the city directories for the city of Cleveland are also online. And so I had a choice. I either could go down to the library and look at the actual city directory, but Cleveland Public also has their directories digitized online as well. So I didn't have to go down there, okay? And then there are other websites that have Cleveland directories online. So I went to the 1940 city directory, and here I find Piuno, I'm sorry about that. And now I can see everybody that lives at that address, 11120 Carmel Road. Look at all of the Piunos who live at that address. Some of them are married, and I think that first one is Frank's brother, and that's Daniel. And so if that is true, if I'm researching everybody, he's married to an Alberta. And then we have a Frank who's a laborer. We have another Frank living in that same house with a middle initial of P. We have Mary, and we have Peter married to Josephine, and we have Rose. And if you remember, Rose was one of the children that was in the house in 1930 and 40. They all still there. So we have that, and everybody is on Mount Carmel. But if you go through the city directories, they have all kinds of information. And one of the things that they had was that the name of the street had been changed. And it said Ingersoll Road, Southeast, is now Mount Carmel Road. So they didn't move. The city of Cleveland changed the name of the street. Remember, we looked at the census and Frank Sr. owned the house that they were in? So I go to the Cuyahoga County Archives, and they have property cards. Here is the property card for 11120 Ingersoll. This is 1936. This tells me who owns the house. It tells me what the property number is, and I need that just like I needed the service record number. And it tells me how many rooms. It tells me that it's a two-family house. It tells me what it's made of, what kind of electricity it has or heating system. It tells me everything there is, and it also will tell me the value of that home. So again, in looking at these properties, the property number is very, very important. So this is 11120 Ingersoll. This is 1936. There was a second property card because there was a reevaluation, and there was a photograph. 1959, July, there is a photograph. So I do see the two-family house. I have an idea what it looked like, and I have an idea where my Frank Jr. lived. And the owner of the house is his father. And it's interesting, he's using his Italian name as the owner. On the census records, we just see him as Frank. But on this card, we see his Italian name. And it is, again, on Mount Carmel, but the property number is exactly the same as the house on Ingersoll. All right, so I got all that out of my way. Seems like I'm all off the track when I'm trying to find out about basketball, but I needed all of that to be able to go forward. So now I have the newspaper searches that I did. And Lou was right. When I put in Frank's name, nothing would come up. But when I put in New York Celtics, his name was there in several articles. So here's just one. And you can see it calls him a midget. He's not a midget. The card for the war says he's 5'7", his draft registration. We can look at him in the on that photograph from high school, he's not a midget. Why are they calling him a midget? And this newspaper was from La Crosse, Wisconsin, not even Cleveland. And he is indeed playing for a team called the New York Celtics. I was deflated. I would have bet my life there was no such team. And then I just kept looking, and I did find another article. And this article also had his name there, but again, it didn't come up in the index. And this was the Montgomery Advertiser from Alabama. So the New York Celtics is just playing all around the country, it seems. So here's Frank's name, but then this says the only man under 6 feet. We know that he's 5'7". And he is the reserve forward. So he actually is on the bench. He's not one of the starting 5. He is sitting on the bench for the New York Celtics, but he is indeed one of the members. And this is 1948. 1948, I found in 2 other newspapers, Idaho Falls, Idaho, and Knoxville, Tennessee. This was an article about the coach, and that he was the owner and the coach of the New York Celtics. And in this article, he talks about being disadvantaged because of an automobile accident at the start of a tour. And remember, Lou told me a story about the team riding in a car. And I'm thinking, this still can't be right, but maybe it is. So here is the coach and the owner of the New York Celtics. He's talking about an automobile accident. He's listed in the Knoxville, Tennessee newspaper, and it's being referred to as the original New York Celtics. And this gentleman played with the Celtics. Now he is the coach. And then a miracle appeared, because Lou called me and said, I got some photographs. I wanted to kill him, but I wouldn't. We become friends, so I wasn't gonna kill him. He calls me, he tells me he's got these photographs, and he got them from his mother-in-law. I thought, oh my God, you didn't tell me she was still alive. He says, I'm gonna send them to you. So here's one of them. Here is Frank in his New York Celtics uniform with that coach we just read about in that newspaper. This is 1947. And we can see that he's not a midget here. He's just a little shorter than everybody else. New York Celtics, they did exist. But I need to know more about them. I need to know who they are. I need to know when they started, who played on the team. And I did learn that they came about in 1914, long before we had Frank, 1914. Here is a picture of the starting 5. But these are the members of the team who seem to always be in the newspaper. And I was able to look up these individuals and see when they were born and when they died. I tried to keep up with them because my thought was, in order to learn about the Celtics, I need to know about these players. One of the players, Joe Lapchuk, I recognized. And if I'm not mistaken, he was the coach for the New York Celtics. But he also played for the original New York Celtics. I mean, New York Knicks, I'm sorry. He was the coach for the Knicks. But I had to keep up with all of these guys. I did a Google search. And my Google search sent me to a place called Lucky Show. And it was I found things about the New York Celtics on here. And so you can see 47, 48, they had exhibition games, and they played in Hawaii in 48. And I was trying to see if possibly Frank had been with them when they did that. In 49, they were playing against the Harlem Globetrotters. Oh my God. I couldn't believe it. I just could not believe it. And so what has happened is that the New York Celtics, as well as the Harlem Globetrotters, they're called barnstorming teams, which means they don't have an arena. They just go around the country and play. And the New York Celtics played the Harlem Globetrotters, and their job with the Harlem Globetrotters was to lose, just as the Washington Nationals. That's their job, is to lose. And they just go around the country and play in various locations and tiny towns. And then I found something in this same website that in 1949, Abe Saperstein, who owned the Harlem Globetrotters, he bought the New York Celtics, and he used them as the opponent for the Globetrotters. I also found, I went in and I put in New York Celtics to see if there's any more things in there, and there wasn't. I put in Harlem Globetrotters, and then I found this, which gave me the years that they were playing and where they played. And then it also told me the years that they played the New York Celtics. I found an auction site. They were auctioning off a pass, free admission. Harlem Globetrotters versus New York Celtics. This is 1949. Still trying to see if possibly Frank is playing with them during this time period. And the auction site said that that ticket sold for $100. Found the Pro Basketball Encyclopedia. All the people that you see here highlighted, those individuals played for the New York Celtics, and they are in that encyclopedia. And then look at this picture. Everybody here looks short except for the man in the middle. Everybody else looks to be quite short, but Frank was not part of them. The New York Public Library has a digital collection, and they had a digital collection on the New York Celtics. I found a book. The Shaker Heights Public Library helped me find this book. It's called The Originals. New York Celtics Invent Modern Basketball. Who would have thought? And in that book, they interview Joe Lapchick, and he gives almost the best detail you could have about how they would get in a car and drive to the games and drive back. And you can see here, he says that they bought a car for $125 and they played for $125 a night. And with an option of 60% of the gate, they made money. He said it sounded good, but they traveled light, usually 5 of us with another player when we could find one. So that little bit of information Lou told me was right too. But they also talked about a man by the name of Max Rosenblum. I knew of him, didn't know him. He's already deceased by the time I come around. But he owned a department store here, Rosenblum's. It was a store for men's clothing. And he created a team in Cleveland, and it was called the Cleveland Rosenblums. I had no idea. But he used some of the players from the New York Celtics. And so there they are. And he was the person who was responsible for the American Basketball League. He helped to establish that in 1925. All this is happening long before Frank comes along. And Cleveland Public Library has a sports research center, and the Rosenblums, Cleveland Rosenblums, were in the photograph collection of the Sports Research Center of Cleveland Public Library. Found the Basketball Hall of Fame. And it had in the Hall of Fame the original Celtics, the New York Celtics. And that was established in Springfield. And so here are the members of the New York Celtics that were inducted in the Basketball Hall of Fame. And under their names, you see the year that they were inducted and the New York Celtics in 1959. Again, another player. I went to the Digital Public Library of America. I put in New York Celtics, and I put in archives, and this came up. Springfield College Archives and Special Collections. Joseph Lyons, he played with the New York Celtics. So now I'm being introduced to a repository that I did not know existed. It's the Springfield College Archives and Special Collections, and they have the manuscript collections for Joseph Lyles, the Joseph Lyles papers. And it talks about the Celtics and the Harlem Globetrotters. So all of this was digital. Again, I didn't have to go there, but I would love to have been there and just fingered through these papers. But here's the scrapbook. I think you can see that pretty good. A picture of Joseph Lyles and a picture of the Harlem Globetrotters. All of that in this scrapbook of correspondence from Joseph Lyles. This is 1952, the New York Celtics and the Harlem Globetrotters. 1952 was the last time the New York Celtics played. And because I'm nosy, I looked to see if there may have been a newspaper article about that, and it was. I found it, Honolulu Advisor, Honolulu, Hawaii. And it was the New York Celtics versus the Harlem Globetrotters. And the Harlem Globetrotters and the New York Celtics were the first team to do a worldwide tour. The Harlem Globetrotters went all over the world in 1952. So here's the history, as you can see it, that I learned from researching the Celtics and being able to say what a wonderful team this was. And it was a team that was a part of Frank's history. And you can see basketball created in 1891, and the New York Celtics started in Manhattan in a settlement house in 1911, and then in 1914, it was the New York Celtics. And from that point on, they played basketball, only stopping every time we had a war. So when World War I started, they disbanded. When it was over, they recreated themselves. When World War II started, they disbanded. When it was over, they recreated themselves, playing their last game again in 1952. So now I can go back to Frank because I know all about his previous life. And I see that he marries. I find a marriage record on him, 1952. And he marries, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correct, but Geraldine End. I should have asked Lou before I did this. But he gets married, and he marries in 1952. Again, online, this is the index, and I probably need to try to find the original record. I checked the newspaper. Here is the announcement. It was under a column that was called Brides Choose to be Married on Saturday. And so this is the announcement of the marriage of Frank and Geraldine. Then I looked to see if I could find just a tiny bit on Geraldine, and Ancestry has U.S. school yearbooks, and I did found a photograph of her. It says she was 16 in this picture, estimated age, and she's at Holy Name High School. And then it tells everything that she was doing, the club she belonged to and everything. And then I noticed there was a picture right next to her, and his name was Gerald, same last name. And then I thought, could she have a twin? So I looked up her family, and yes, this is her twin. Now, if it had not been for him, and if I was researching Geraldine, I found his death, 2013, I'm sorry. I found his death on Find a Grave. And whoever put up almost her entire genealogy. And so I knew from that I was looking at the right person. And again, this is a collateral line. This is her brother who gives me information about her and letting me know in that information that she is indeed married to Frank. Again, I find in 2022 a newspaper, the News Herald, and they're celebrating 50 years, Frank and Geraldine. And it tells me that they got married at Mount Carmel Catholic Church. Hopefully I got the right photograph of the church, and I found that photograph in Cleveland Memory Project at Cleveland State University. But here's a little paragraph that tells us a little bit about Frank Piono. He was a basketball player, it says, for the New York Celtics. He worked for Chase Brass. He was a mail carrier in Willoughby and Wickliffe. And he served in the U.S. Navy. We've proved all of that in this genealogical research project. And then, I don't know, I think Lou and I were talking, and he said his father-in-law had cancer, and he was at university hospitals in Hoosier. And so I said, well, let me just see if I can find out what university hospital was doing for cancer patients. And I came across this article in the Plain Dealer. And lo and behold, they had interviewed Frank. 86-year-old Frank Piono is interviewed at a Hoosier University Hospital. And what they were doing is they had a woman there by the name of Jacqueline Bradley Palmer. And she was going from room to room playing music for the cancer patients. And so she had gone in the room where Frank was, and she played Dean Martin's That's Amore. And so this article was September 25, 2012. And then you can see at the bottom when they interviewed him, he says, this is one of the happiest days I've ever had. I never knew the hospital could be so much fun. And so again, nosy Debbie Abbott, who is this Jacqueline Bradley Palmer? Well, I found some information on her in Cleveland Magazine. So now we can see what the person looked like who was serenading Frank and his wife. They gave us the whole story behind what she was doing, and she is considered a music therapist. And University Hospital was using music therapy for their cancer patients. Frank died March 9th, 2013. This is the announcement in the Cleveland Plain Dealer. And again, it matches all of the things that I saw before, things in the census records, it matches. I know his mother and father, all the things I found on all of those people are right here in this death notice. And I should have went and picked up his death certificate, but I didn't do that. There is an index, and I really would like to see the original, so I have to go get it. But here's the index for his death. And it did tell me on this index his birthday, which matches what was on that draft registration card. He dies March the 9th, and he dies at home. And so his industry, it says USPS, United States Postal Service, and we saw that when they celebrated 50 years. I found his headstone on Find a Grave. He's buried at All Souls Cemetery. This is the story of Frank Piuno, who told the truth about his life, and only Debbie Abbott didn't believe it. His family did. But again, I say thank you, Lou, for allowing me to do this. And I'm hopeful that you appreciate the information I was able to find on your father-in-law. Then the last thing I found was a year later, Geraldine puts a notice in the Plain Dealer to her husband, who has been gone from her for 1 year. And she says, I'm in heaven. She knows that he's in heaven. She says, I miss you so much and love you more. Life is so different without you. This tells us what kind of relationship they had. This tells us about their family. It tells us really everything we need to know about Frank Piuno and playing for the New York Celtics basketball team. These are the resources I used. A book called Cages to Jump Shot, the originals, the New York Celtics Invent Modern Basketball. And then these are on the left are the Google searches that I came up with to find different things on the New York Celtics, and hopefully a little bit about Frank. And then on the right side, you see all of the resources, the libraries, the archives, the newspapers, everything that I used to be able to reconstruct this oral history. So I say thank you for listening to me today. And I think we hit a three-pointer. Basketball terms. We know just a little bit more, at least I do, about Frank Joseph Piuno and his wife, Geraldine. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Abbott. That was fantastic. And I think it just really emphasizes the necessity of looking in a lot of places to really get the whole story, and just the importance of getting that context to incorporate it into people's stories. So I think now we're going to go into questions. And I saw at least 2 people raise their hand. Hang on, y'all are going quickly. Okay, Denise, I think you raised your hand first if you want to go ahead.
My question goes back to when you were discussing the basketball teams and the Celtics or the Celtics versus the Globetrotters. And you mentioned that they were assigned to as opponents for one of them to lose. So because they were exhibition games, so somebody had to lose, and which team was assigned to lose?
Are you familiar at all with the Harlem Globetrotters?
Yes, I'm from New York.
All right, they never lose.
Yeah, they're terrific. I mean,
that's because the other
a better team of exhibition.
They played the same team every time. The Harlem Globetrotters plays the same team every time. And right now, the team that you will see them playing with, because when we start, at least here in Cleveland, when it starts getting around the holiday, they'll start coming around here in the holiday, and they will be playing the Washington Nationals. They play the same team every single time.
And do they take turns losing?
Nope. No,
So always, the Globetrotters always have to lose?
the Globetrotters never lose.
Never lose. Okay, fine. I was trying to make sure.
But
you know,
keep
racial
in mind
equity-
now, keep in mind that the opposing team has, in my opinion, the same skill level as the Harlem Globetrotters. They have the same skill level, but their job is to lose.
And is this opposing team white or black? Or
White,
mixed?
white.
Okay,
And it could be, I don't know, I haven't seen them in a little while, so it could have some mixtures mixed in there because the Harlem Globetrotters now have women.
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, they have, and those women are very, very good. They have at least 2 or 3 women as part of the Harlem Globetrotters now.
Traditionally, they've always been black, so I
And
don't
they
know.
are, they are
integrated.
black. They still are. But now they have women. So at least I think 3 of the team, 3 of them are women.
Good for them.
So things evolve, but the object, see, when you talk about the New York Knicks, they have an arena.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
At Madison Square Garden, which is
And Boston
famous
Celtics
name.
have an arena. Just like the Cleveland Cavaliers, we have an arena. The Harlem Globetrotters don't have an arena. They just travel around the world and play basketball.
I would have doubt in their early days that they would have been able to get an arena. Just
I don't
because,
think that was the purpose.
yeah.
I don't think it was a purpose for them to have an arena. They're an
Oh.
exhibition team and they just went around the world and played basketball.
Yeah, they formed because they wanted to pull kids out of the street and give them something positive to do, a better life.
They started in a
Yeah.
I forget what the Harlem Globetrotters started, but
Probably Harlem,
well,
which is
yeah, and the New York Celtics did the same thing because they started in a settlement house. So you gotta pay attention to the time that these things are happening. So we're talking about the 20s. We're talking very early times. And what I learned is I follow basketball, I think, fairly closely, but the early years I knew absolutely nothing about. Absolutely nothing about it. So as I'm listening to Lou talk about New York Celtics, I'm thinking he's got these names mixed up. There is no New York Celtics. There's the New York Knicks and the Boston Celtics. But in trying to pull this oral history together, I had to do a research piece on the history of basketball. So again, when you're doing your own research, you got to stay in the time and figure out how things started or how it evolved. I hope I answered that okay.
I think you did. We're going to move on. Teresa has a question. If you'd like to go ahead and ask that, Teresa.
Hello, Dr. Abbott, and thank you
Hi.
for your presentation. My question is, how would I go about finding the, what did you call it? It was the, man, I'm sorry, I wrote it down. The information about the property?
Here, okay, I think I mentioned in the very beginning that you probably need to pull down the Family Search Wiki,
Okay,
familysearch.org wiki, okay?
okay.
And on that, when you do that, put in, it's going to ask you what you're looking for, and you need to do 2 things. One, you need to put in the state that you're researching, and you need to put in the county that you're researching.
And that would be to obtain the property card?
No, that is to find out where records are.
Okay.
because you don't know where they are. And so you need to know what repositories are available to you.
Okay.
And so for our Cuyahoga County, Ohio, our repository here is the archives.
Okay.
And the archives, when you go on their website, then you see what they hold, what kind of records they hold. And one of the record sets that they have are the property cards, the old property cards.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So that's how I knew to go there. Well, because I know the repositories here in the city of Cleveland, but
Okay.
and they have pictures. Most of those property cards got pictures of the houses on it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I see Lou has his hand raised, if you want to go ahead. Oh, wait, Lou, oh, there you go.
Yeah, thank you.
I talked
Dr.
about him
Abbott,
enough.
you did an outstanding job. I still learn things every time I listen to you. Here's another curveball for you.
Oh no.
First of all, I am alive. I'm doing fine. Thank you for not killing me. But we also found out that one of the reasons why my father-in-law supposedly got fired from the New York Celtic is because
Oh my God.
they won a couple of games against the Harlem Globetrotters. That's what he said. So he said that they had to fire him because they won a couple of games against them. But
All right, I'll check it out. I've never known the Harlem Globetrotters to lose against anybody.
and there's probably about a half a dozen family members. I see their names on here. So
Oh
you
God.
represented us great, and thank you. You're enjoyable to listen to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got two additional questions. So we've got a question that says, my small hometown in southern Indiana has not made their newspapers available to newspapers.com. Is there any other resource for that information? And we had somebody answer, but I was just wondering if you had any additional sources that you would say.
Well, she said it's not at newspapers.com.
Yeah, that's correct. She said they are not on newspapers.com.
Okay, but you have a library. So I would check the local library. And they may not be digitized. You may have to go to the library to look at the film. You know, our libraries have newspapers on film. But there's also Genealogy Bank. It's a subscription database. But newspapers are different on there than they would be probably in newspaper.com. And the library might have a database that's called Newspaper Archives. You won't see that at home, but you would be able to go in the library and use it from the library. And then the Library of Congress has newspapers that are free called Chronicling America. And I don't talk about that a lot because I think it's kind of cumbersome to use, but there are newspapers there. So I would start first with the public library and ask them about the newspapers. And if anything's digitized, they would know it.
Yeah, she said that she's visited the library, but she's in Florida. But what I would say to that, to your point, is contact the librarians there. They hold a lot of knowledge. And also, if that's ever something, you know, having them sent down here, like microfilm, that sometimes is a possibility. So
yes.
If there's really a newspaper that's on microfilm and you can't find it anywhere, talk to a librarian. They're very nice people, and they want you to, you know, get your answers that you're looking for. So that's always a possibility. Okay, and then last question we had from someone in person, yay. And the question was, did you ever interview Lou's mother-in-law?
No. and let me tell you why. I am a genealogist who does not really want to deal with breathing people. I don't want to talk to people. I want everybody I'm looking at to be deceased. And even with Lou, until I just was really up against the wall, I never called him about anything. I never asked him anything unless I was just really up against the wall. And so, yes, I probably should have interviewed not only his mother-in-law, but his wife, his in-laws, because they're living. And so all of them will probably have different stories about Frank that, you know, others wouldn't have. But a lot of times I leave living people out because they put up brick walls. They tell all kinds of stories and they get in the way. But I probably should have. Frank did it. I mean, Lou did it when he sent me them pictures.
Well, okay, I think that's all the questions that we've got. If you have any other questions, you can send them to me and I'll send them to Dr. Abbott. I just want to reiterate how great this was, and we so appreciate your time, Dr. Abbott. And also you, Lou, thank you for bringing this to the light so we could all enjoy this presentation about the New York Celtics. And
They
Frank.
did exist. They did exist.
So with that being said, if you have any questions, anybody, Marcy, if you still need some help with your question, just send me an email. My email is shannongraham@polk-county.net. So I'll send out a follow-up email. And with that being said, I'm going to wish y'all a happy weekend. Everyone have a safe weekend, and I will see y'all next time.